The truth is, le is not about past, and Mandarin does not have tense either. They call it learning, we say it's fun. Welcome to Fun Mandarin 玩中文。大家好, I'm Brian. Le, such a tiny character, quick to write in less than a second, but packed with so many uses. Even though you can find plenty of detailed rules about le in books, it's notorious for lacking clear, hard and fast guidelines. This becomes even more obvious when you ask a native speaker, why do we use le here? Why do we need le here? Why do we need le here? Heck if I know. It just feels right. Since le has so many different uses, and one of the biggest misconceptions is to think it's just a past tense marker. So in this episode, we're going to focus on how le works with verbs and debunk that myth. Just like in our previous episodes of the Grammar Even Grandma Can Understand series, we would take our discovery approach. The first step is to set a relevant context. In our first episode, we used 要 and 会 to talk about our New Year's resolutions. Now it's been a year. Let's reflect on how much we've accomplished last year and use the yearly review as the context to understand the different uses of le. 去年你说要多运动，这个新年愿望实现了吗？我每天都去公园跑30分钟，不过昨天只跑了10分钟，而且今天还没跑。哎呀，今年也要坚持下去呀！一定会的。我看了最新一集的 Fun Mandarin 玩中文以后再跑。So, from the dialogue, have you figured out what Max's New Year's resolution was last year? That's right. Jack says, 去年你说要多运动。This tells us that Max decided he wanted to exercise more when he made his New Year's resolution last year. Now, back to the dialogue. Jack is checking in with Max to see if he has turned his words into actions by asking, 这个新年愿望实现了吗？ Max replies, 我每天都去公园跑30分钟。Sounds like he's really sticking to his running routine, right? The word 都 here emphasizes that this is something he does regularly every single day. But just like it says, 不过 we also know he didn't quite follow through yesterday. He admits, 昨天只跑了10分钟。So far, we've seen le used with two verbs, as in 实现了 and 跑了。Think about this. How does adding le change these two verbs? Do this sound like past tense to you?
Yes!
It's easy to fall into the past tense trap because le is often used with actions that have already happened. But, as we'll see, le doesn't actually represent past tense. To master the use of le with verbs, we must free ourselves from the tense mindset when it comes to Mandarin. Let's first clarify what tense really means. Tense tells us when an action happens, whether it's in the past, present, or future. Take the verb run in English, for example. I run, I ran, I will run. In English, the verb changes to show when the action happens. But Mandarin doesn't change the verb form to show time. The verb 跑, run, stays the same, whether you're talking about the present, past, or future. That's why Mandarin doesn't technically have tense. You might be wondering, how do Mandarin speakers show when an action happens then? The answer is time words. With these time words, it becomes much clearer when the action takes place. Now, back to the dialogue. When Jack asks if Max achieved his New Year's resolution last year, he says, 实现了吗? Le shows that the action is completed. But there's a yes-no question marker, 吗 at the end. So, 实现了吗 means has it been achieved? When Max answers, 昨天只跑了10分钟, 了 shows that his action of running was completed within a 10-minute time frame. Here's the key. In English, we would say, yesterday I ran for 10 minutes, which might make 跑了 sounds like past tense. But in Mandarin, 跑了 doesn't mean ran as a past tense verb. It simply shows that the action was completed within a certain time frame. Linguists call this aspect. It's about whether an action is completed, ongoing, or repeated, not about when it happens. We don't need to memorize the terminology, but it's important to understand that aspect is different from tense, especially when using 了 to indicate an action is completed in the past. Now, what if the action hasn't been completed? Do we still need 了? For example, Max says he hasn't run today. 今天还没跑. As you can see, when the action isn't completed yet, we don't use 了. Instead, we use 还没 before the verb, as in 还没跑. If you're still a bit confused about why completed action doesn't equal past tense, don't worry. Let's take a look at the third 了 from the dialogue. Max says, 我看了最新一集的 Fun Mandarin 玩中文以后再跑. Let's break this sentence down. We see 了 in 看了, which tells us the action 看 is completed, right? But hold on, the structure goes as 看了以后. 以后 means after or later. In English, when we say after doing something, we put the word after before the verb. In Mandarin, it's the other way around. The verb comes before 以后. So, 看了以后 means after watching. 了 indicates that the action watching will be completed. In other words, 看了以后 gives us the idea of after finishing watching. So, when Max says 看了, has he already watched the latest episode on Fun Mandarin 玩中文? Apparently not. He says he will watch it later and go for a run. This is a great example of 了 is not just about completed actions in the past. 了 can refer to completed actions in the future as well. Here's another example. 我吃了晚饭以后再做作业. In this case, 了 in 吃了晚饭 indicates that the action having dinner will be completed in the future. After the first action, 以后再 introduces the sequence for the second action, 做作业. So, we know the speaker will do homework after having dinner. Now, we know 了 is used for completed action. Let's find out the second usage of 了 in the dialogue. 对了，去年你说要多存钱，有说到做到吗？当然有啊，我每个月都存100块，已经存了12个月了。哇，今年跨年夜去吃大餐，你请客。As the dialogue continues, we find out that Jack's New Year's resolution was 多存钱。But the question is, has he achieved his goal? Yes, he has. As Jack says, 我每个月都存100块。都 shows that he does this regularly every month. Then Jack says, 已经存了12个月了。Why are there two 了 here? Is le doing more than just indicating a completed action this time? Yes, it is. This brings us to the second usage of le. Let's break it down. Jack says, 已经存了12个月了. The first le after the verb 存 shows that the action is completed. It tells us Jack has saved money for 12 months. But then the second le at the end of the sentence tells us that the action is ongoing. In other words, Jack has already saved money for 12 months, and by adding one more le at the end of his sentence, it indicates that he plans to keep saving. Now, can you tell the difference between these two sentences? Jennifer 中文学了3年。Jennifer 中文学了3年了。Which one is just stating the fact that Jennifer has learned Mandarin for 3 years? Which one suggests she has learned Mandarin for 3 years and will keep learning in the future as well? That's right. Jennifer 中文学了3年 just states that she has learned Mandarin for 3 years. It's a completed action. But when we add the second le at the end, it implies that she's been learning Mandarin for 3 years and will continue doing so. Simply put, the second le adds a sense of continuation or ongoing action, even if the action started in the past. Now, let's find out how Jack responds to Max's request for the New Year's Eve dinner treat. We will also look at the last use of le with verbs in the dialogue. 我昨天去银行存定存了，5年到期才能取出来。哎呀，真不巧。没关系，我们先约好，5年后的跨年夜再给你请。In the dialogue, Jack says, 我昨天去银行存定存了。How many verbs are in this sentence, and what are they? That's right. There are 2 verbs, 去 and 存. If both verbs describe completed actions, can we use le after 去? Yes, we can. But here's the thing. Since Jack went to the bank and deposited his money as a sequence of actions, we only need one le at the end of the final action to mark the completion of the whole sequence. So it would be more natural to say, 我昨天去银行存定存了。One more example. 他上个周末来我家打乒乓球了。In this sentence, 来 and 打 are both verbs. Since these actions happen one after the other, we only need le after the final verb phrase 打乒乓球. As you can see, when talking about a series of actions that happened in the past, we only need to add le after the final verb or verb phrase to indicate that the entire sequence is completed. Now, let's wrap up with a quick quiz to test how well you've understood the use of le. Grab a pen and note down your answers as 对 or 不对. 1. Le is a past tense marker in Mandarin. 对不对? Of course, 不对. Le is not past tense marker. Mandarin doesn't have tense in the same way English does. Instead, we talk about aspect, which is more about whether an action is completed, ongoing, or repeated. 2. Le should be placed before verb 对不对? The answer is 不对. Instead of memorizing where to place le, let's look at this sentence from the dialogue. 昨天只跑了10分钟. With the color coding, can you spot the pattern here? It's easy to tell that le is placed after the verb 跑. If you are interested in knowing more about how color coding works in grammar structure, check out our first episode later. 3. When talking about an action that is ongoing, we should only use one 了。对不对？ Not sure of the answer? No problem. Let's look at this sentence from the dialogue. Jack says, 已经存了12个月了。In this case, when we talk about an ongoing action, we actually need two 了。The first one marks the completion of the action, while the second one at the end of the sentence indicates that the action is still continuing. So the answer here is 不对。4. When talking about consecutive actions in the past, we should use 了 after each verb. 对不对？ The answer is 不对。For consecutive actions in the past, we only need one 了 and it should be placed after the final verb or verb phrase, marking the completion of the final action in this sequence. 总的来说, forget about tense. 了 with verbs can be grouped into three categories, summarized as 3C: completed action, continuing action, and consecutive action. Practicing 了 with real-life examples instead of just memorizing rules is the best way to master it. I hope the examples in this episode help you better understand how 了 works. Now it's your turn to practice. Here are some ideas. Review your New Year's resolutions or plans and see what you've already completed. And talk about what you are still working on. Using your own personal examples will help you master 了 even faster and more fun. Last but not least, remember to come back and practice with our daily quiz. That's all for today. 别忘了点赞、留言和分享，或用 Super Thanks 超级感谢支持我。谢谢收看 Fun Mandarin 玩中文，我们下次见。